Hey there, welcome to Data Democracy, a podcast where we think about how data and AI can benefit companies of all sizes. We do this by interviewing experts across industries. We ask them what they think about data, what are some of the challenges they face when it comes to data, and what is their dream state about data and AI. If they had a magic wand and time and resources weren't constraints, what kind of intelligence and models would they wish to have? Thank you for tuning in. Enjoy the episode. We've got a great guest today, Melissa Donohoe. Melissa is a rock star in the world of email marketing. She runs her own marketing consulting business now, MD Digital, and she is also a productivity coach. She's got a really impressive background, and she previously ran marketing teams at Legal Shield, Meet Mindful, Gaia, Frontier Airlines. She's also worked in marketing teams at Best Buy, Blue Moon Works, and so on. She's super hardworking, very personable, and a very sharp strategist. Let's welcome Melissa Donohoe.
Thank you so much, Midi. I'm great, and I'm so excited to be here and on your podcast.
Let's go. Awesome. Appreciate you coming in. So yeah, well, first let's dive into your journey so far. How did you get to where you are? Tell us your story.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm a marketer, as you mentioned, really more specifically an email marketer, and work a lot in the CRM world. But I actually started as a data analyst. So you can imagine that like data has a very special place in my heart. So I started as an analyst, a marketing analyst. So I was looking at, website behavior and purchases across all marketing channels, and also did a lot of auditing within companies to make sure they had marketing analytics reports available to them. And then I was kind of like thrown into the email marketing world. I raised my hand to take over for somebody who was about to go on maternity leave. She was in the middle of a re-platform, so completely switching the tools and systems that she uses. And she ended up having to go on maternity leave 2 months early. And so I had hardly any training, a tool that was partially implemented, and needed to figure out how to work with the data team to get it implemented and start doing something I had not done before. But I really, really loved it and have not really looked back on stepping away from email. Email marketing is my favorite.
There you go. Perfect. Yeah, you were thrown right to the wolves and you made it.
It was, yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, in terms of, I know you run your own marketing firm now. How is it, and what does your day-to-day look like?
Yeah, so I have a handful of clients, and I'm really doing like a lot of what I have done at other companies, but now I get to do that for just more businesses, which I love. But as far as like my day to day, a lot of what I'm doing is like looking at a database of people and seeing like, okay, how can we leverage this database of people and the marketing strategies that I have in my toolbox to generate the most revenue and engagement from these people for the business. So putting together strategies like that, and then working with teams to get them implemented in regards to like making sure the data is available so the segments can be targeted, working with creative teams on visuals and copy, and then actually, building them in the tool and sending them out.
That's awesome. Busy work. And any tips and tricks for anybody who's aspiring to be, to run their own firm or be an email marketer, in the corporate world as well?
We kind of touched on this, but this isn't really a tip. This is more of like an FYI. If you want to start your own business, like prepare to work really hard. I love what I do, and I work a lot, but it's worth it to me. And I think anyone who owns their own business or wants to own their own business needs to know that, at least at first, like there's just so much there's so much that has to get done, right? From your area of expertise to then also like the business management type of things. And also, by the way, you need a sales funnel to have clients. So you get to do like all of it and more.
You have to wear all the different hats and do it all. That's awesome. Very cool, very cool. Yeah, let's talk data. I know you mentioned you started off as a data analyst. Now I know you're really sharp with data. You have a keen affinity towards it. So now I know. How did you get interested in data, and how did you get started in data?
Yeah, so my first job after college, I worked for Best Buy. I worked in, I just call it the parts department. Like if your refrigerator is broken or your laptop is broken, and you need a part to fix it, like that's the department that I worked in. And it was a consumer facing business, but that is where I first like got my hands on, I would say, website analytics and just understanding like how businesses function and like where revenue comes from and what are the different things that you measure that are leading indicators of retention. And I loved that you could see all of that happening, and that it gave you like these levers to pull to say like, oh, we need to do this to increase this metric that we're looking at, or whatever the strategy may be. So I would say that's kind of where I like fell in love with the data side of marketing, and I have mostly always wanted to be in marketing. So those two like collided for me at the very beginning of my career, and I just loved it.
Awesome. And what about now? I know the customer side of data is a little different from. There's a lot of overlap as well, but what in terms of email marketing, what are some of the metrics that you look for in your business right now, and how do you think of data?
Yeah, so there's a lot to email marketing. I feel like, especially in compared to some other marketing channels, there's a lot of different touch points. So I kind of like to break it down into a few. So the first one is the highest level, and it's kind of like your database health. And if you look at it, once you acquire an email address, it's kind of like an owned piece of data. And you, as somebody who sits within CRM, you always want to be, and by the way, CRM meaning customer relationship management. So that can really span outside of email. It should span outside of email. But you really want to be looking at like, okay, of the users, the consumers that I have access to as a email marketer, how engaged are they? Because once they unsubscribe, you don't have access to them anymore. So measuring the health of your database with metrics like activity rate, which tells you how many purchases or how many purchases are being made out of your total like potential whoever can make a purchase. So that's like some of the highest level is the database health and database growth. Then you kind of get into the campaign metrics, which are more surface level metrics, things like open rates, click rates. This is like you send out an email, you know exactly for that email how people are engaging with it. The next layer, I would say, are these engagement metrics, which is like, okay, you've sent the email and maybe people are starting to click on it, but like then what? How are they engaging with your brand after you've sent them the email? So website views, like how long are they staying on your website? Are they making purchases? Things like that. Are they logging in? And depending on the business, you'll have different conversion metrics that you want to go after. Some campaigns may be directed towards making a purchase, while others are more directed towards like having a login or watching a video, depending on what your business is. And then the last piece I would say are more of like performance metrics. So this is taking things like the revenue and understanding, like doing the calculations on them to understand what they mean in relation so that you can compare them to other campaigns. So things like RPM, which is revenue per thousand, on your base, to understand how efficient was the campaign in regards to your whole database, or things like AOV. So that's average order value, helping you understand like at what price were people most willing to pay. So those are kind of like the buckets, and then I threw in some metrics there too of what I'm looking at within each of those buckets.
I love that. Yeah, definitely. I had, in my view of email marketing, I had campaign metrics, engagement, and performance. But definitely, database health is a really, really important step as well. And some of the things that I've come across, and you and I have worked together, and a lot of time it's like you can't really start off by measuring performance metrics. That's really the end goal, and it's a culmination of all of your effort that moves the needle in terms of performance, whether it's revenue or retention. It's a huge moving, it's like a moving ship, turning a ship. So I think definitely you gotta fine tune every step of the funnel in order to get to that performance metrics and get some, movement there in the for retention and AOV and all that.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's awesome. In your mind, what are some of the challenges you face when you take on a new clients? And email has been there for a while now. So, do people kind of have an intuitive understanding of how these things work, or is it more of a hand-holding exercise that you need to do to begin with?
As far as the data side of email marketing goes, I feel like it's this like black hole because there's so much availability of email marketing strategy available, like just surfing the web on Google. But to bring those to life, like you have to have your tools and systems implemented, and they have to be connected to your data. Otherwise, like you're not going to be able to do any of the cool things that you can read about when you Google an article about email marketing unless the data is there. And so that's where I find it's actually where I have spent a lot of my time in my career too, is implementing these ESPs, email service providers, and working with companies to map out what that implementation looks like. But there's definitely some challenges there. So I would say, like, the first challenge is always understanding the data set, because it's different from business to business, and there's never a data dictionary. There's never a data dictionary, because that would like make things really easy. But I mean, understandably so. Like there's just a lot there, and it can change often. So I would say like the first thing is very much understanding the data that you have to work with, and the second piece to that would be availability. So how available is the data to you as a marketer? And some data that is available is really hard, ends up being really hard to connect to your marketing tools for whatever reason, whether it be like because it's tied up in some man-made historical software, or for privacy reasons, or whatever. But so it's like you need to understand what data you have and what data you need, and if you can make the data you don't have more available to you within these tools. I think that all right there is like definitely a big challenge and a huge hurdle for a lot of companies.
Yeah, that's a very great point. I mean, I'll take that away as a learning. I got to work on my data dictionary. No, yeah, definitely. And then I think one overlooked aspect of email marketing is the collaboration the amount of collaboration it takes. It's not just sending out emails. It's really, you're joined to the hip, to your data teams, design teams, branding and marketing and everybody. So there's so much collaboration and team effort that it's often, hey, just send out emails.
Yeah, that's so true. Yes, and it's a huge collaboration with data teams and BI teams because you also you want to make sure you're talking to the right people. And unless you have those data points available, and unless you understand the data that's flowing into your tool, which usually it's the data team that understands that data the most, you're not going to be able to target the people you want to.
Right. Absolutely. And yeah, and everybody wants to get to the cool things. Hey, let's do event-based marketing when we don't have a data infrastructure. Well, so yeah. So yeah, event-based is basically behavioral marketing. A customer does something on the website or on the app, so based on that you send out events or email based on that. So in your mind, what percentage of companies are ready for, say, event-based marketing versus, we'll have to start from the beginning and build up to it?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know if I can throw out a percent there, but I do think that older companies, more established companies, have a much harder time because I think the way that we have traditionally collected and stored data is so different, and normally older companies would have a harder time getting buy-in to change those platforms when it's not impacting the bottom line you can show so effortlessly with a paid marketing campaign. So they tend to get deprioritized. And then you get stuck with this old tech that you can't do modern strategy with. So I think newer companies have the advantage in that they're typically a little bit more nimble in the tools that they're using to be able to use things like event-based marketing.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's so true that older established companies are mostly have relational databases, tables, but how do you convert that into real-time events? And usually data is updated once a day or something, but you can't get to event-based with
right,
lagging data. So that's definitely a challenge.
And I think the larger the company, the harder it is too, because the more data there is and the more potentially acquisitions of other companies that come in and with their own tools of data that you try to merge and duct tape together. And then you've got, 6 acquired companies all kind of leveraging something that might talk to each other eventually, but it becomes a big mess.
Yeah. No, I mean, that's event-based is kind of the holy grail, but it's a challenge to get to that point in a larger company. Yeah, that's so true. In terms of in general, what are some of the challenges that you face when you in marketing? And I know we talked about it a little bit, but are there other challenges that you face in email marketing world?
Yeah, I would say another challenge as it relates to data is the merging of different data sources to tell one united story. So, within email marketing, you send from an ESP. This ESP will have its own attribution model for how it calculates revenue. And then you have your paid marketing teams who are using their own tools with their own attribution models. And then you have usually a website analytics tool, which is leveraging a last click attribution model, but essentially you have all these tools and all of these different attribution models, and you're trying to understand like what impact does my channel have on the business in compared to all of these other channels. And when you want to be able to tie that back to longer term performance metrics like LTV, you need to have it more honed into the user level instead of just like a general campaign. And so now you're trying to map like database metrics with platform metrics, and it gets really messy. And I've seen that an issue, like no matter where I go, it's like, how do you merge it all together?
Yeah, and if only we could say, hey, stop, I'm going to test this out. Why don't you all take a vacation? I'll do this, test this, and, have you back when you're ready. But yeah, I mean, that's really, even on the data side, that's one of the key data science side. It's one of the key challenges. How do you measure the impact of individual tests versus, what's driving the ball forward, right?
Yeah.
It's really, really hard. Yeah. What are some of the criticisms that you have about data teams, and what can we do better? I know you said data dictionary. I'll take that out. But we have thick skin. We can take it.
So we kind of touched on this too, but I think the best thing that data teams and marketing teams can do is to work more collaboratively together. I think in my experience, I feel like a lot of times people who work on data teams, like they want to kind of go off and fix and build and come back with like the solution, right? But I don't think marketers always know exactly what they need or what they're looking for. It's like an iteration of seeing the data. So like we might ask for something and then we're like, wait a second, that doesn't look like how I thought it was going to look. There must be something else I'm missing. What if we look at it this way? And so I think when teams can work very collaboratively to not like build, this fully baked automated report, but to start to dig into like, what are the questions we really need to know and how do we want to answer them and how do we want to visualize that, and come to some sort of agreement before like the full mechanics start happening. I think teams can work better, because then there starts to get this like, well, that's not what you asked for. And it's like, no, it's not. Sorry. So can I have something else?
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, if we're, and I've done this in the past too, like I want to go work in silo and give you the best possible thing, but that's not really, like you said, you don't really know what you're looking for in terms of on the marketing side. So it really has to be collaboration from the beginning. And maybe some of the solutions that I've kind of implemented recently are some data catalog tools that give you access to the entire database and basically has definitions of all fields and also distinct values in each field. That way you can see, okay, what are the things that are available in each of these, so that could be a possible solution. But yeah, definitely a great point.
And I think that's so important for the marketers too, is like we need to really understand like whenever we're looking at a report, what is the source of the data and how is that metric being calculated? Because if you don't understand that and you're making assumptions, like it can, the story that you're trying to tell or trying to unwind could be totally different. And I have found that having those calculations like bookmarked.
Yes.
So whenever you're like, wait, how did we say we were calculating that again? It's documented and you can go back to it and you know.
Yes, no, absolutely. I mean, again, I've done this in the past where I come up with a method to, calculate a metric, and then I forget about it when next quarter comes in. I'm like, oh, what did I do? 100%. And it's so important to be, consistent, even if you're not accurate, at least consistently measuring it the same way will tell you, okay, directionally, what way are you going? So I think that helps a lot.
That's so true. I just did this today. I about I don't know, a couple weeks ago, I made some calculations on a forecasted revenue, and then I came back to them today, and I was like, how did I make these calculations? I feel like they're kind of low, but I don't know what I did. So now I have to redo them.
Exactly. That's my life every day. Go talk past committee, but I do it.
There was one other thing I had that I think is, for working agreements essentially between marketers and data. I think if the data teams can just accept that the marketing requests will literally never end,
Yes,
you'll be much happier. Like if you think you're done, don't worry, I've got more.
yes. I mean, just allocate a person to the marketer, and everybody will be happy. Yeah, it's gonna be a continuous funnel. It's a good thing, job security for us. So that's a good thing. But yeah, I mean, definitely, like we talked about, right? So it starts off with the upper end of the funnel. Then you slowly drive into all these metrics, and then you also think about other ways of impacting customers, and it's definitely never ending. And also, there's so many tests that you can do, and so many things you could learn. Yeah, I mean, I've learned so much with collaborating with marketers like you, and working on email marketing, paid media, and there's just so much.
Likewise, and I think it's great to have somebody from the data side of things who's invested when we do things like run tests, because it allows us to do tests and segmentation that's just way more complex than what we could do on our own as marketers.
Absolutely. And I think within the marketing world, the data teams have responsibility both ends. We provide data in the beginning for you to send emails or for marketing this thing, and also on the back end come back and kind of measure the impact of what we did. Like we talked about campaign metrics, engagement, performance metrics. So gotta also, it could be different teams in bigger companies. It could be the same person in some companies doing both sides of the marketing, handling marketing data. So I think it's a never-ending and a solid collaboration.
For sure.
That's awesome. I know. I mean, one thing that I've learned from working on marketing data is, especially digital marketing, it's never perfect. There's all sorts of gaps, and it's only sort of directionally correct every time. So how do you handle this? How do you explain that to your customers and clients?
Yeah, so you touched on consistency, which I think is probably the number one most important thing, because if you have consistency, you can measure and benchmark against yourself and the continuous success and improvement that you're making within a business. I think that's the first thing. The second thing we also touched on, which is really understanding the way that you're calculating your key performance metrics and the source of that data is very, very important. And an example of that is like if you understand that one report is a last click attribution report and another report is more of a channel attribution, then you can leverage the reporting that comes out of both tools, but you can understand how to speak to your leadership team about that. So sometimes, like revenue won't be working, or like UTMs will break or something. So you don't have the last click data that you typically have. But if you know that, if you know like, okay, UTMs are broken, last click channel reporting is kind of off, you can go to your next source. You can go to your channel source and you can say, I understand that this is going to be higher revenue. You can communicate that to your leadership team, but you can say, this is what we have instead of nothing, right? So yeah, I think, and then also I find that leveraging the different attribution models is also really helpful when you're trying to look at a specific initiative over time. And like, I'll give you another example. Like, say you're doing a promotion for a business, and like you mentioned before, there's always all this other noise. It's not like every time we send a promotion, it's on a Tuesday at 2 p.m. and it was the exact same product and everything worked the same and paid media spent the same amount of money also. Like, never the case. So it allows you to, I feel like, be able to look across tools and see what, if we run the promo, 1 week and a month from now and another 3 weeks from now, like, you can see when paid media may spend a bunch of more money and take away from your last click revenue. You may be able to see in one tool that your channel attribution is still more consistent. So it gives you more availability to see what's happening within your channels and how your campaigns may be performing.
That's so true. That's so true. In terms of, I know I see this a lot in terms of in the data world, in data science, especially AI, machine learning, data science, that we're always having to, balance between people who are super excited about it and think that this is magic, this will solve the world problems, and also on the other side, us having to evangelize and having teams to adopt this and, hey, this is really good, can you please try it? So I call it expectations versus, tempering expectations versus evangelizing, data science. Did you feel that way about email marketing as well? And how do you handle it if that's the case?
So like, are people excited about or like weaponizing email?
Yeah, so in terms of, hey, you send this email out and this will solve all our issues, all our problems. This will increase retention by X%. You don't have to do anything else. Versus, we don't have time for emails right now. So that kind of dichotomy of prioritization.
Yeah, prioritization is something that I think is so important when it comes to your email program, because there's a lot of initiatives. And so what I typically find is that businesses will go to the email team when they're not going to hit revenue goals, and they're like, oh, just send an email, like, we'll just increase revenue, just send the email. And what that means is that something else becomes deprioritized. And what typically becomes deprioritized are retention efforts that are trying to help combat some form of churn, or like continuing to keep the base engaged. So it's definitely that fine balance, because if you're only in this reactionary state of sending out promos and blasts to try to increase revenue, like, you're going to deplete your base, and you're not going to have a healthy pool of people to then sell to. And by the way, people are people and they just want value. So if you are constantly trying to sell them, like, they're going to unsubscribe. And so, yeah, so the flip side of that is having these more nurturing campaigns, onboarding campaigns, churn reduction campaigns that keep your base healthy and engaged, even if that you can't equate that to the revenue for this month. So what I've tried to do in that is work with data teams to create reports that help tell that story as to why these other campaigns are so important, and what that means. So like using metrics like LTV and saying like, we're going to increase LTV by, $20 or whatever. That's a big jump depending on your business, but so yeah, I think being able to like understand what campaigns are going to drive in the short term and the long term for your revenue and for your business helps with that prioritization, because you will have this like influx of people that are like, bring in more revenue. Wait, why haven't you fixed churn yet?
Exactly. It's definitely a balance between reactionary efforts versus long-term value-add efforts that I'm super excited about. Usually, but yeah, it's always a balance.
And I will say it's very hard to create these campaigns with the reporting tied to it that says this campaign led to a churn reduction of X or led to an increase in engagement of X. And that's on the performance side of the reporting that we talked about, where it's like understanding the ROI on your email campaign, like whether it's true revenue or engagement, but understanding the ROI for anything outside of revenue, I feel like becomes very hard.
It is super hard. I mean, we recently had an example where the only way to easily do it is by just stopping the emails for like a month and then starting back up. So one of our pipelines broke, so we did not send retention emails for a month. And then we started sending, so we were able to look at that window and say, okay, this is when we did not send emails and this is when we kicked it off again. So what's the impact? Because everything else in the business stayed the same. So unless, I don't think we can deliberately do that, but it happened, so we were kind of bouncing on it to kind of measure the impact.
Yeah.
It's really hard. Or you have all the other teams stop and then you do your work. Which again won't happen. Cool. Yeah, I mean, it's a really exciting time in AI and data science, machine learning, and everything. So we've got ChatGPT, we've got everybody pouncing on it. So, what are your thoughts on just general AI, data, and everything? How excited are you?
I'm super excited. I'm very excited. I think that it opens so many doors in efficiency for email marketers, and I don't think that it actually takes away from jobs. I think it just makes us better at our jobs.
Absolutely. And I mean, especially it really is a friend for copywriting and marketing and different things. And even on the data side, I mean, I don't start writing code from scratch anymore. I just ask ChatGPT to kind of give me it's not perfect. It gets me like 70% there, and then I kind of have to work it out. And I think I've heard similar stuff from marketers as well. It gives you a platform to start on, and then you can improve on it.
Totally. Yes, exactly.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. Well, I don't think it's gonna take away from a good copywriter or a good marketer is definitely key to understanding who your customers are and everything. And I see that on the data modeling side as well. There's lots of vanilla machine learning models out there, but unless you tweak it and tune it to your business, it doesn't really give much ROI. It's the same way with marketing. Unless you can just take an email template off of the internet and just apply in a business, it doesn't work that way.
I don't think you can do that yet.
Yes. Do you use ChatGPT? Are you trying to use ChatGPT in your work flow in any way?
Yeah, I am. I would say I use it probably daily at this point. And I use it for things like helping. For example, today I asked ChatGPT to help me come up with relevant dates for promotions connected to a very specific type of audience. Um, so, like you can search, and when you're coming up with like a promo calendar as a marketer, you can search for holidays. You're going to get all of these one-off, like it's National Hot Dog Day, but there's like thousands of those and you don't really know which one's gonna like pop off, like which one's meaningful, which one's gonna gain traction in the world in any given year. So I found that ChatGPT is really good at giving more dates that are relevant dates but aren't necessarily like national holidays. So for example, with a brand that is focused on astrology, giving you like astrological times throughout the year that are relevant for you to speak to, versus like you would never, like, like you just, those things you can't necessarily find online.
Yeah, absolutely. There's so many things that the current search engines are not useful. You got to spend like hours and hours to get to the answer you want, but ChatGPT is kind of talking to a friend and bouncing off ideas.
Yeah. Another thing that I've used ChatGPT for is analyzing customer testimonials to help understand like what is it that's really resonating about this product with customers, so that we can then use that in sales messaging.
That's very cool. Kind of like you're using it like a sentiment analysis, natural language processing tool to understand, okay, what is the customer really talking about in terms of the product. That's
Right.
very,
Yeah.
that's awesome. It's awesome. Yeah, there's always all these cool applications being built on top of ChatGPT. If what are some of the things that application that would help you, personally and generally for marketers?
Yeah, I think like having a plugin for ESPs. So if I could go into our email platform and say, build me an audience that would be, or like I have a promotion for people who have recently purchased and have shown interest in shoes, build me an audience. And then like they could build it for me.
There you go. That's perfect. Yes, a kind of ChatGPT. Your customer data platform sits on top of ChatGPT, and then kind of talk to each other, and also talk to the database.
Right. Like it would be so great if I could not only tell, like if I could just speak to my ESP and say, I want to create a promotion for people like this, and then they actually make the data connections of like, okay, how do I actually with the data that we have available, how do I actually execute on what they're asking? And then also, what's the right messaging and framing in regards to the copy, and like then also builds the copy and the visuals, and like then it's all there. We might actually we might take some jobs away if we get to that point.
That's what I was thinking. Hey, Melissa, come on there. You're kind of encroaching on our jobs, some of our jobs. But yeah, I mean that would be really cool, right? I think, and also it'll open up other areas of jobs that we don't know about today. Because maybe in the near future, it'll be more about training these large language models to build these plugins that you talked about. And off-the-shelf products can't really train. You have to train it based on the data that you have, like you said, and for the customer segmentation for the products that you have. So you really have to have prompt engineers and data scientists really train that model in a way that it's applicable to your business. So again, not taking away any jobs, but kind of moving around responsibilities in a way that it's more meaningful.
Yeah, and I do think that if we were to get to this place where like the actual building of the email inside of a platform is more efficient, I mean, I still think there's tons of green landscape for email marketers to go explore. And I say email marketers, but I do think that there's email and CRM tend to get grouped together, but they're actually very different. And I mentioned this, when we first started talking, CRM can be any channel. It can be email, it can be SMS, it can be direct mail, it can be paid media. And right now, I think most companies are putting all of their resources towards email. Whereas if email teams were more efficient at building emails, they would have more resources to go explore direct mail or push notifications or SMS with an integrated strategy without having these siloed teams.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, there's again to my question in the beginning, and I'll ask you that now. But if you had a magic wand, you would do so much more, but you cannot really get to it because of the initial challenges of building the infrastructure, getting it set up right. I think event-based is kind of a golden space right now, but really if all this is taken care of, then you'll find other ways, other arenas that we've never, dived into. And that's really important. Yeah. So if time and resources and money weren't constraints, what kind of data would you like, and what would you do with it?
I think what I would like is not so much like more data. I think because the way that our systems are set up today and all of the challenges that we've talked about, like more data just adds complexity. But if there was like a tool, and I think this like AI is it's like the perfect time for this, right? Where you have a tool that helps you make sense of the data that you have and helps you understand like how to leverage it in marketing. That's what I want, without having to like, painstakingly go through an Excel spreadsheet of attributes that you think are relevant for a specific segment. Like you can buy third-party data and you can see like who has recently bought a camper, or like the data points are endless. There's hundreds of thousands of data points, but like, okay, now you have 100,000 data points. Like, what are you going to do with them, right? So I think a tool to help connect all of these dots and make the data more actionable is where the ROI is at.
That's really helpful. Yeah, I mean, it's really, again, to your point earlier, it's really data teams collaborating with marketers from the beginning will help kind of solve some of these problems. Because in my mind, I could be, hey, this is super cool. This is so much data that you can do so much with. But from your point of view, you're like, this is a lot, actually. I don't want to deal with all this data. And also, we're not there yet. I'm asking you for campaign metrics. We're talking about third-party data. We're not talking the same language at this point.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. No, this is super helpful. I learned a lot, and always cool collaborating with you. Had a great time when we worked together, and this was super fun. Any closing thoughts? Anything for me?
I agree. This was great. I always feel honored to have the opportunity to talk to somebody with so much data knowledge and experience. So thank you so much. Just happy to be here.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Melissa. Appreciate you being here.